Does China make a better Range Rover than Range Rover? To find out, I've got the new Jaecoo 7 and a Range Rover Evoque. I'm going to compare them for style, critique their interiors, test their technology, see how practical they are. I'm too old for this.
I'm too old for this.
Investigate their reliability. Shut the fuck! Measure their performance. And see what they're like to drive. Yeah, come on! I'm my Watson and you're watching Carwow. You can stop shaking it now, Nick. Let's go. But first, let's compare their prices. So the Jaecoo starts at £30,000, the Range Rover from £44,000. The cars I've got here though, £35,000 for that one and over £50,000 for that one. Now I'm going to go into more depth into the pricing and options and stuff later on and compare the lease deals on them. It will really, really surprise you. Before then though, we need to look at these cars' designs. You're paying a lot more money for the Range Rover. Does it seem a lot more expensive? This generation of the Evoque came out in 2018. Now, since then, it has had a midlife facelift, but it's been about for a bit, hasn't it? Still looks good, though. What doesn't look so good, though, is this. Look, the condensation in that headlamp. Awful. Now, there are various accents to liven things up, though. These plasticky bits don't look or feel very good. There is one thing that they do with the Range Rover, and you have all the pillars in black, so it looks like the roof is floating. That is cool. It was also one of the first cars to feature poppy-outed door handles. Come on, poppy out. There we go. They feel quite nice. Moving towards the back. Oh, this one's got 20-inch alloy wheels. Looks nice, though they actually start with 18s, which look very small. At the very rear of the car, got quite a nice rear end, hasn't it? Little roof spoiler, big proud Range Rover badge on the back. That's what you're paying quite a bit of money for, and more condensation here. Overall, though, good looking car. So much so that Jaecoo thought, ooh, do you know what? We'll have some of that. To be fair, Jaecoo went their own way with the front. Look, the grille is very different to that on the Range Rover. In fact, I prefer the front end of this car. It's got that modern kind of upside down lights where the main beams are down there and then your DRLs are up here. They're cool. But as you walk down the side, you start to notice, it's quite Range Rover Evoque. Can't really tell on this car because it's all black, but on other versions, those pillars are all blacked out, so you get the same floating roof design. You've also got the same style poppy-outy door handles. Alloy wheels at least on this car, 19 as standard, though you can't get bigger ones like the 20s on there. But look at this part here. The roof spoiler, the rear end. It's not dissimilar, is it? And this part, this fake diffuser light on there, and the big proud name. Though Jaecoo is not quite as cool as Range Rover, is it? But you're saving a lot of money. However, there are a few things we need to test. The first is the sound of the door closing. Yeah, this Rangy sounds quite solid. It's not bad, but not quite as nice as that. Let's try the back doors. They often feel cheap on the back. What's it done? It just locked itself. Random. That's a bit more tinny than this one. Let's try the boots. So, seems solid. Let's try the Jaecoo. That sounds more like it's struggling to open. But this is the worst thing. Listen, it rattles a bit when it shuts. Watch this. Yeah, that does seem a little bit more expensive. There's something else I've noticed on this. Can you see the real bad orange peel on here? It's not great, is it? Ain't no such problems here on the Range Rover, my friend. Also, look, this fits really nice. Not so over there. Believe it or not, this charging port shut. That's how it needs to be. It's not ideal. Now, there's been some other problems I've noticed on other Jaekoos. I reviewed the Jaecoo 5 and I noticed that the paint on certain body panels just didn't match. Thing is though, I'm a nerdy motoring journalist who really likes to inspect cars closely. Most people just look at them and go, do you know what? I think the Jaecoo looks just as expensive as the Range Rover. And they'll be more than happy with the fact it's way cheaper. But can it match the Range Rover on the inside? Once again, considering it's been around for a while, the interior design of this car is pretty cool. Material quality is nice as well. It's squidgy, squidgy, squidgy. Nice, nice, nice. Very soft and yielding. And the leather feels expensive. There are a few things that I'm not so keen on though, like this big gear selector here in this sea of plastic. There's no cover for the cup holders. The vanity mirror is pretty small, but I like the fact that you have nice touches such as soft felt in the glove box to stop things rattling around, and rubber in the door bins, once again, to stop things rattling around. And, oh look, premium feel. Oh, electric adjustment for the steering wheel. Oh, and while we're at it, the gear shift pedals are solid metal, which is nice, and the stalks are damped. Oh, what's going on there? I think they need a bit of lube. Speaking of which, let's slip inside the Jaecoo. And first thing I'm going to do is this. Well, they don't make a noise, do they? They're absolutely fine. Though, to be fair, you can just replace the windscreen wipers on the Range Rover. What you can't do is replace the interior to make it look as modern as the Jaecoo's. There's not much in it, but I do prefer the look of this interior. And generally, like squidgy materials seem like they're on a par with the Range Rover. However, when you go a bit lower down, the scratchier plastics are more scratchy. And it's not squidgy down here in the door pockets. Also, door bins, just plastic, no rubber lining. And while this is nicely damped, it doesn't have the felt inside. I've also noticed some other things. So when you dig deeper, you'll notice that the carpets just don't feel as nice as in the Range Rover. And look at the stitch in there. They just couldn't be bothered to go all the way around. They just, I think we'll just go across there. Once again, these are things that really nitpicky motoring journalists pick up, and most people probably won't care. They'll go, oh, look, it's got a massive screen and a bright display. Now, I'm going to go into more detail on the tech in a bit, but overall, it's not far off, really. The damped effect of the switches is just as good, if not better, than on the Range Rover. I like the fact that the gear select is here on the steering column, where it should be, rather than just unnecessarily taking up space here on the centre console. And the non-leather bits, the fake leather, feels quite close to the Range Rover's real leather. It's just some of the niceties, you know, like you haven't got electric operation for the steering wheel and some other bits and pieces that you don't really need, that's lacking. And in some ways, it's not lacking. Look, you get a much better vanity mirror. And you'd have thought that people who are willing to spend extra on the Range Rover would be more vain. They're the kind of people that probably want more choice, and that brings me on to the engines. The Range Rover is available with 4 different engines. So you can get a 1.5 litre turbo petrol, that is just front wheel drive, and it has this much horsepower. Or there's 2 2-litre diesels with either this much or this much horsepower, and those are 4-wheel drive. Or there's this plug-in hybrid, which is a 1.5 litre petrol mated to an electric motor and a 12 kilowatt hour battery, and that has this much horsepower. I do like a Range Rover gas strutted clamshell bonnet. Let's just check out the Jaecoo's. I bet it's the same. It's going to be the same, isn't it? Yeah, look, gas strutted clamshell bonnet. However, there's fewer engine choices here. So you can have a 1.6 litre petrol. That's either front wheel drive or all wheel drive. It has this much horsepower, or this plug-in hybrid, which is a 1.5 litre engine mated to an electric motor and an 18 kilowatt hour battery pack with this much horsepower. However, it is front wheel drive only. So how does that affect the performance? Well, this particular Range Rover Evoque is a 2023 model. It's basically identical to the very latest cars, but its plug-in hybrid system has 309 horsepower, which is actually 40 horsepower more than the version you can buy today. But even though this plug-in hybrid Jaecoo has less power, you shouldn't write it off just yet.
3, 2, 1.
Four-wheel drive traction isn't really helping that much. And wait a minute. I'm closing on him. What? It's close. Oh, he's just ahead. So then what are the times? Well, the Range Rover did 0-60 in 7.2 seconds. This took 7.3 seconds. The standing quarter mile for the Range Rover was 15.6 seconds. This was 15.7 seconds. I'll tell you what, this was so close. Considering that has a lot more horsepower, it doesn't seem a lot more quicker. Anyway, that does bring me on to something more important about these cars, their practicality. Let's see how they compare in terms of space in the back. Headroom's all right, knee room's all right, though this area feels a bit cramped. Look, so I can't really stretch out into the seat in front, and it's not as roomy as I'd like. Is the Jaecoo better? Well, first off, there's just more space here. There's more room in the footwells. I can move about a bit more. I feel more comfortable, and yeah, knee room's better as well. Headroom is better too. Yeah, it just seems roomier. Let's try it with 3 in the back though. So Jack, jump in. Nick, get in the other side. I imagine it's quite tight for the old shoulder room.
Oh, it's not too bad though.
It is. Oh, shoulder room, look at that. Look at that. Okay, right, now let's compare it quickly to the Range Rover. Okay, imagine you've got to go a long distance like this in the back, 3 up. Which one are you going to rather go in, Jaecoo or the Range Rover? After 3, 2, 1, Jaecoo. However, does the Jaecoo also have a more practical boot? Well, let's have a look. Just open it up. Obviously, we've got an electric tailgate. It's okay for someone my height. The standard petrol Jaecoo has 500 litres of space, which is decent for a car of this size. However, this plug-in hybrid can only carry 415 litres of luggage, and that's including the underfloor storage. The Range Rover has a boot capacity of 472 litres. Less head risk there. And there is less storage underneath here. So maybe there's more space here, I don't know. This definitely looks deeper than on the Jaecoo. But this looks wider and it seems to go back further. Now, ideally, I would test these with... Now ideally, I was... Excuse me, I just put the phone on silent. Schoolboy error. Now, ideally, I'd test these with suitcases, but I forgot them today. Another schoolboy error. So I'm going to have to use a Nicholas and he will have the final say. So, Nicholas, would you like to get into the Jaecoo first? Don't bang your head. Go on. Okay. Right, we'll just shut it, all right? Makes me laugh every single time. Okay. Experience that for a moment. Okay. Exit, sir. Right, and try the Range Rover.
Ooh.
Give him a moment. That's enough. So, Nick, if you were a set of suitcases, where would you rather be?
Range Rover.
The Range Rover?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so it's a win for a Range Rover in terms of boot capacity, but there is something that the Jaecoo doesn't, the Range Rover doesn't. It's this. Look. Oh. Mm-hmm. See this parcel shelf? If I hang that on there, and hang that on there, pull this down, and wedge it in there, apparently you have a cinema screen. I you not. Anyway, what's the rest of the technology like on these cars? The infotainment screen on the Range Rover it's a little bit old-fashioned, to tell you the truth. Kind of slow to respond, as you can see, a bit of lag. It's got a lot of information on it that you're never going to use, like your off-road stuff. And to do the climate controls, you have to do it through the screen. You do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which are wireless, so that is good. And I also like the digital driver's display with the good old-fashioned dials, even though they are digital. You get quite a bit of information on there. I do like that. So you've got one USB port here, a wireless charging pad there, another USB in here, and 2 in the rear. But overall, I think the technology feels a little bit dated. Bizarrely, in this newer Jaecoo, here in the rear, you only have one USB-C and an old-fashioned USB normal. I can't remember what it's called. In the front, you have one USB-C and a USB normal. Whereas here, with the charging pad, you have 50 watts charging wirelessly. It's cooled as well. That is insane. That is faster than almost any other car. So I can forgive those normal USBs. Also, the infotainment screen on this car is way better than on that Range Rover. I mean, just look at it. It's brighter, it's sharper, it's so much more responsive. Let's just go into the Navi. Whoop, zip, 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 zip. Look, just zip, 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 it zips. And I like this function as well. It's quite easy to find stuff. So you hit that car icon and you can just scroll through all the different menus really quickly, and it's quite self-explanatory. Hit this icon and you've got quick controls for absolutely everything. It's so customizable, this car, and it's logically laid out. And the ventilation system, once again, is through the screen, but I just find it a little bit more logical and easier to operate than on the Range Rover. What I don't like so much as the Range Rover is the digital display. Now, it is brighter and it is clearer, but the information and the way it's displayed isn't as nice as in the Evoque. However, we get a heads-up display as standard, which is really, really good. You get ventilated seats as standard. You get a Sony sound system as standard. You get this panoramic glass roof as standard. Oh, and it opens. It actually opens. It opens quite a lot. However, if you want something like on the Range Rover, it's not standard. Now, if you want a glass roof on this mid-spec version of the Evoque, you have to pay an extra £1,100. And if you want the opening glass roof, then it's a further £1,600. But really, to match the Jaecoo to the Evoque, like for like in terms of spec, you're probably going to need the autobiography version, which is the top spec version of this car. And then it costs £58,000. So £58,000 for this, or £35,000 for the Jaecoo. And things become even more clear-cut when it comes to buying the cars on lease. You see, this luxury Jaecoo 7 plug-in hybrid on a 3-year lease, 30,000 miles, it'll cost you £15,000 in total over the time of the lease. A top spec Range Rover autobiography plug-in hybrid, which remember costs you £58,000 to buy, over 3 years of a lease, £44,000. £44,000, what? It's crazy. I mean, this is a no-brainer. I tell you what's also a no-brainer. If you want to check out the very latest and best lease deals, you need to head over to carwow right now. You can do that by following the link in the description of this video or on the pinned comment. I've also put a pop-out banner you can click on, and you can scan the QR code if you want, if you've got your mobile phone and live handy. Lost the will to live then. I was too shocked. You can lease 2 of these. Well, you can lease 3. You can lease 3. You can lease 3 of these. And that's not the only thing you should be wary of with this Range Rover. The alarm keeps going off in this car for no reason at all. It's really annoying. Even when it's unlocked, you open the door and the alarm goes off. Sometimes it just goes off randomly. And that brings me on to reliability. Shut the f up! Now, one of the good things about leasing a car is that if something goes wrong with it, it's easier to get it replaced than if you bought it outright. And that's something to consider with one of these. You see, Range Rover ranked 24th out of 31 manufacturers overall for reliability in the 2025 Driver Power Owner Satisfaction Survey. We don't have any data for Jaecoo yet, they're so new. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And that brings me on to the fact that you might even consider buying one of these cars used. Now, the Jaecoo is so new that there's very few of them available used, and they're usually nearly new with just a few thousand miles on the clock, and you usually save about £5,000 over list, so they start from around £30,000. Here's a selection on CarWow. Obviously, there's way more Range Rovers available used because they're sold so many more over the years. And interestingly, I found this one on CarWow. So it's 1 year old, it's 11,000 miles, and it's £35,000, which means it's the same price as a new Jaecoo, and that is very, very tempting if you're willing to buy a used car, because with a used car there is a bit of risk, isn't there? Now, I did a car vertical history check on the one that I found on CarWow and it came back clean, but you should always do a car vertical history check when you're buying a used car, because a car could have a hidden past. Here's a car vertical history check that was done on another Evoque, not on CarWow, I hasten to add, and it's been written off. So if you're buying a used car, follow the link in the description to go and do a car vertical history check and use the code CARWOW for 20% off. Thank me later. Finally, we need to compare how these cars feel to drive. Obviously, I'm starting with the Range Rover to set the standard, and by the standards of Range Rover, the suspension isn't quite what you'd expect. See, larger Range Rovers, they just glide at the road, just float over bumps. This smaller one is a little bit jiggly. It's always like kind of just like they're like moving around a bit, like slightly itchy. Never feels settled. It's unusual. But that really is my only major complaint. The rest of the driving experience is, it's fine. So the controls, like the steering, it's responsive. It makes the car turn in the way that you expect it to and exactly when you want it to. The brakes, sometimes they can be grabby on plug-in hybrids. They're not grabby here. They're well judged. They're smooth, which is handy if you suddenly accelerate into the car in front of you. And overall the handling is fine. Bit of lean in the bends, but not bad. And it feels quite nicely set up. So the driving experience, I wouldn't say it's sporty, but it does exactly what you expect and want it to. I'm fine with that. It just doesn't quite give you the proper Range Rover experience, and you are paying for the Range Rover name. So while this car is good to drive, there's one last thing I need to check, and that's the performance of its brakes. Let's do a brake test from 100 miles an hour. 100 to 0, 95 metres, and 60 to 0, 35 metres, which is pretty good. How will the Jaecoo perform? Can it match this Range Rover? Interestingly, the suspension on this Jaecoo isn't really that much worse than the Range Rover, and that shows how un-Range Rover-y the Evoque is. The way it goes down the road, this jiggles a little bit, not really that much worse. It's a little bit embarrassing really. However, there's something I can notice straight away in this car compared to the Range Rover, and I'm getting more tyre noise. I definitely am. At high speeds, you notice a bit more wind noise as well. So that element of Range Rover luxury is present and different to this Jaecoo. It can't quite match it. But I think the biggest difference is the controls. So the steering on the Range Rover is just way nicer. It's like it's not connected to the front wheels at all. Almost doesn't want to self-center. The brakes as well are just a little bit more grabby. So those are the areas often where the Chinese manufacturers haven't nailed it exactly compared to the European ones. That kind of element that you have as a driver where you feel like the car is doing exactly what you want it to. With this, it's all just a little bit kind of vague and more of a suggestion than a command. Is that enough to bother people who are going to buy these kind of cars? Now, while things like the steering feel and the brake feel do bother me, is it enough of a problem to really upset the kind of people who are likely to be buying this kind of car? I don't think so. They're going to be more interested in things like, what's the efficiency? And on paper, this can do 400 mpg, though the reality, if you don't regularly charge it, you're going to get about 60 mpg. And the Range Rover is supposed to do 200 mpg, but once again, in reality, about 60 mpg. So very, very similar. Do you know what? I wonder if the braking performance is going to be very, very similar. So last thing to do, let's do a brake test on this Jaecoo, see how it compares to the Range Rover. Oh, wasn't expecting that. It stopped from 100 miles an hour in 93 metres and from 60 in 32 metres. The braking performance was better than the Range Rover. Ooh, well, that's really given me something to think about. Which one's best? It's going to be a tough decision. So then, what's my final verdict? Well, for me, as a motoring journalist, I would rather have the Range Rover, and it should win this test. But speaking on behalf of consumers, people actually buying cars, I've got to give the win to the Jaecoo because it just represents so much better value for money, and it gets blooming close to the Range Rover for a whole lot less cash. And that's why it wins this test.